Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where we take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the Eberron adventure Flight of the Magpies, designed by Michelutto for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my Platinum patrons, Andrew, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick R, Andy, Chris, Manuel, Basil, Nixie, and Travis. And Gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Nima, Marcos Did, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, AK, Cert, 2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Ross, Limpy Spuds, Jerome, and Fatboy619. Thank you all very much for your support. I have recently fallen in love with Eberron. I think it's a really cool setting. I really wasn't playing D&D during its creation back in the early 2000s, so I've kind of been discovering it in the last year or so, especially with Eberron rising from the last war. I've been looking at a lot of adventures in the DM's Guild that are based in Eberron. It's a really neat setting, more so even than the arcane punk industrialized aspect, but it's all very just pulpy and swashbuckling and adventure, which is a lot different thematically than the high fantasy Tolkien-esque setting of the Forgotten Realms. So Flight of the Magpies is an Eberron adventure. It's designed for level 3. You could probably put it anywhere in tier 1. It's a pretty good highlight reel of what Eberron has to offer. It involves like an airship heist in mid-air, which is really neat. You're rescuing a warforged, so it's an extraction, I guess. You go to, at one point, like a casino city, which kind of reminds me of that side plot in The Last Jedi with the high rollers and the casinos and everything. I have some misgivings about it, however. It's got some issues both with that casino portion in Chapter 2 and with the actual airship heist in Chapter 3 that prevents me from giving this a hugely glowing review, even though I like a lot of what it's doing, and I think the setting and the concepts are all very good. One thing I want to mention, don't judge an adventure by its cover. If you asked me what this was a cover of, if you took away the DM's Guild logo and took away the an Eberron adventure there at the bottom, this would look like the kind of book that you would have to read in like your literature class, your English literature class or something. That would be some kind of whippy, like, oh, the Flight of the Magpie. You know, it just doesn't, the cover and the title don't necessarily speak to me as a like swashbuckling heisty adventure. So it's a very odd choice that this was used, whereas like this art in here, which granted is of course the just Eberron stock art, but still is much more indicative of what you'll be doing. So please do not judge this adventure, or any adventure, by its cover. It's a good rule of thumb. I want to mention also, this product has a very unique layout and presentation that I have never seen before. You know, I've reviewed a lot of products at this point, well over 100 in fact, and a lot of folks use the standard, you know, sepia tone parchment paper and the same scaly sans font, and, you know, to make it look like it's an official product, or they might do something similar, or they won't do anything at all. This one specifically doesn't attempt to look like it's, you know, part of the official Wizards of the Coast products. It does its own thing, and I think it does it quite well. I think it's a really impressive layout, even though it uses a plain white background, which is usually not very attractive and nice to look at. But in this case, this kind of orange color scheme it uses, the font is really nice. I mean, look at, this is the actual like adventure breakdown synopsis is very unique with the little circles and symbols and everything. And we get art on just about every single page, and throughout this adventure, a really good use of sidebars of multiple different shades. You get these dark ones and these gray ones. And even though it's a plain white background, like every single page just kind of pops in a very, very nice way. So I actually was very, very surprised by how attractive this layout was. It's so different than what I'm used to, but it looks really, really good. So huge thumbs up to that. So the actual adventure, it could be a one-shot, or it could be part of a larger campaign, which is a plus. I think it's cool that it was kind of, I feel like it was basically designed as a one-shot. And a lot of adventures are, because you're trying to do a, you know, adventure in a certain amount of pages length, and that's kind of what you end up creating. This one especially, though, because it almost entirely skips Act 1. It's almost an Adventure League style, where you start off, you're already aboard an airship working for the Magpies, which is this fun kind of mercenary adventure group, which feels like that would vibe very well with the player characters. And the Magpies have hired the players as part of this extraction to rescue this warforged person who is aboard this other airship. The problem is they have limited information. They know they're aboard an airship, but not which one. And they know the guards of this airship. The problem is their faces are known too much in the city where the guards are going to be. So they're bringing the players to this city of Stormhome, which is this high-class resort, gambling, carnival city. And the player's job is to get the information of which airship they need to target. They return to the Magpies, and then that's when the actual airship heist begins. So that's a cool setup. That's a really neat setup. You get a chance to talk to the Magpies, learn a little about them. You're on an airship. Like, it's a cool way to start. Granted, if you were part of a larger adventure, you can't just probably teleport your players to there. You'd have to have some kind of setup, so maybe some kind of adventure hooks would have been nice there. But for a one-shot, I think that's a cool intro. Stormhome, it's a neat idea. Again, I'm picturing that scene from Last Jedi, where the players have to go in and they've got a mission to find somebody in this exotic location that's sort of dangerous in terms of its guards and stuff. But in this case, it's not dangerous at all. And everything the players do is completely inconsequential. It's very strangely written, where the players are just meant to have fun. There's a couple different mini games and carnival games they can play, including hitting up the casinos. But and the designer even mentions, it really doesn't even matter what the players do or what their plans are. Wherever they go, that's where the targets will be, which is Carl and Lenny. That's a Simpsons reference, right? Lenny and Carl. They just show up at whatever of the, if it's a casino, then Lenny's a gambler. If they go to the temple, then Carl's religious. It just, wherever they go, there they are. They can bump into them, immediately strike up a conversation, and learn what they need to learn. It's just really dissatisfying. I wasn't necessarily picturing something like, Ocean's 11, where they have to concoct this big, elaborate scheme to figure out where to get this information. But still, I was hoping it would be something interesting there. There would be multiple steps and some checks involved. And I get the important part is you don't want the players to completely fail, because you want to continue the adventure, and it does mention, failing forward, so allowing whatever plan your players concoct to eventually work. But still, I think, a good designer could come up with multiple steps that involved, okay, you learn the information, but there will be consequences, like they will step up the security, for example, or those kind of things. So there's a way to do that. Instead, the designer kind of abdicates all of that and literally just mentions, hey, just let your players have fun. However they decide to get the information, they get the information, and it's done. So Chapter 2, it's got a neat setting and some neat ideas, but it doesn't really execute on any of that stuff, and I found it largely disappointing. And unfortunately, the same is kind of true of Chapter 3, which is when the players return to the Magpies. They report the fact that they know the airship. And there's a fun twist where, so the Magpies had hired these Aarakocra to actually do the extraction, and the Aarakocra are hungover and messed up, and so oh crap, we have to actually use the players, and here's a zip line, and we're gonna have you go down to the airship thing. That's a fun twist, probably a bit obvious because you figured that was coming, but I did like that. Although there's an odd part here where it even says, the designer even mentions, once during the playtest, the party may decide to infiltrate the ship on their own while it's still on the ground instead of returning to the Magpies. I would have thought a lot more parties would do that. At least as part of this, knowing there's a heist coming, go and scout out the ship, and then figure out what kind of the guards situation are and all that, and maybe they do want to move in. And unfortunately, it doesn't actually change that much. You'd think it would be a lot easier to go in at night when they're not expecting anything, rather than ziplining in the middle of the air during the next day. So there are notes on that, but it's kind of disappointing. It doesn't actually change a whole lot. The restaurant's not open. One of the guards is asleep. That's not a whole lot of difference there. But the problem is, in a heist plot, the plan, capital T, capital P, is a major component of the story, which is where your players know what they have to do. They get a chance to plan how to do it. Everybody gets divvied up into different jobs, and then it gets to be executed, and then invariably things go wrong. That's the heist. So in this case, the players don't get any chance to plan. Assuming they return back to the Magpies, which is what the adventure wants you to do. They return back to the Magpies. They think their job is done. They've gotten the information. The Aarakocra are going to go do it. And the twist is, oh, we have to actually go do it now. So they don't know anything about this airship. They're just propelling down there on the zip line. They are given some supplies. They're given a little badge that lets them like change into a different kind of disguise. A bead which lets them all levitate, which is kind of like their extraction plan to escape out. So that's kind of neat. But when they land, they basically land at the cargo hold, and the way it's designed is just a series of rooms. Like there's not really... The players never get a chance to really plan on what they want to do and how they want to do it. So it really transforms what should have been a fun heist into basically a linear dungeon crawl, which is another disappointment. So they just and there's no maps, by the way. There's no maps whatsoever. It's obviously another complaint of mine. We don't get a map for this, whether a battle map or just an actual like cutaway map or anything. There's none of that. It's just a series of rooms. So they land at the cargo hold, which is, you know, and there's cool stuff in each room. Granted, I mean, it's kind of a well-designed dungeon. There's a bunch of animals in force field cages that can attack the players. There's sleeping guards when they first board. There's a whole guard room with got some nice loot in there. There's a restaurant where the players can engage in some role-playing or try to lure out certain guards or do some kind of shenanigans. And then there's the final actual boss room with some guard drakes and everything, which is nice. So, I mean, it's a nice little dungeon, but it's just room after room. Like, they go from one room to the other to the other. So you really lose the entire heist thing, and instead you just have... It's just a dungeon crawl with a certain mission, which is to get to the end of the dungeon, fight the thing, you know, fight the boss, and then get the person and get out. So, ultimately... The individual parts are well designed. There's a lot of really interesting ideas. I love the idea of beginning the heist by going to the like casino planet and getting in some shenanigans there, but I found that was disappointing in execution. And I love the idea of infiltrating an airship in midair and ziplining over there and having this job. But the actual airship I found was a little disappointing because it basically just boils down to a series of rooms. They just go from one room to the next. Whether or not they have to fight in that room or explore or do something else is different. So in terms of any other dungeon, I think it does allow for a lot of fun opportunities for role-playing. The NPCs seem to be fairly well designed. There's only 3 of them in the Magpies, but you know they all seem like fun folks. Not a whole lot of exploration, although every dungeon is going to have some exploration, but it's just... It suffers from being too linear. It's odd because Chapter 3 suffers from being too linear. Chapter 2 suffers from being a little too open and loosey-goosey because it's just like, hey, whatever the players decide to do, that's going to work, and then they move on to Chapter 3. You know, it just doesn't have... I don't know. I needed more structure in Chapter 2, or at least if you want to do the options thing, which I think is fun, then at least have multiple options there. You know, make it be a multi-step process to actually getting this information. It just seems to go way too easy in Chapter 2, which makes me think maybe this is supposed to be like an Adventurers League style, like let's get it going and let's keep the pace up. We don't want to spend too long at that because we want to get to the fireworks factory. We want to get to the airship heist, which I can understand that, but I don't think that was the idea here. I think it was just designed to be a short adventure that could be played as a one-shot, or it could be played as a adventure in a larger campaign. As is, though, I would have to make a lot of adjustments. I mean, I like the idea of the mid airship heist, but I think I would also want to have a scene where the party is given like a schematics of the airship and shown, hey, where do you want to zipline in at, and redesign the airship so it's got different rooms that all branch from each other and maybe some guard patrols. Like, just make it more dynamic and interesting rather than just a series of rooms, because ultimately I think that's a little disappointing. There is one funny bit with a shocker lizard, which is this random... One of the animals in the cargo hold is sentient, it's intelligent, and it can actually help the players. That's a big plus one. I always like to have non-conventional NPCs that can aid or hinder the player, so that's kind of a fun little addition there. And ultimately the ending is, you know, they fight the last boss and the Drakes, they save the Warforged, and they make it back to the Magpies, or they could side with the actual House Lyander, I think, that has this Warforged, and then turn against the Magpies. A lot of DM's Guild Adventures do this, where it's like, oh, and by the way, the players could just side with the enemy, and then that changes the rest of the adventure. Good luck, DMs, which... Okay, yeah, I mean, yes, any adventure can change depending on what the players do. I don't necessarily ever need the designer to spell that out for me in terms of, hey, make sure your players are having fun and being the center of attention and really steering this adventure. Like, yes, obviously that should be part of it, but as a designer, give me enough information to work with. Give me the details. Make it like this, where it's easy to digest, easy to read in a very lovely format, but I need a little bit more to go on and a little bit more details, especially for Chapter 2 and then Chapter 3. Not so linear, not just a simple dungeon crawl, because you got a really cool setup with the airship heist, and I feel like it's just not quite well executed in the end. All right, so final pros and cons for... I'm going to leave it on this screen because I really don't like that cover for Flight of the Magpies. Pros, unique format and attractive design with lots of artwork. It's a really, really, really nice looking product. Pros, fun NPCs and plenty of opportunity for role-playing. That should definitely be a part of every heist, but this one especially, even during the final heist, because you're given those, what are they called, glamour badges or something that could transform you and disguise you. There's a lot of really fun opportunities for players to just enjoy themselves through role-playing, which is nice. And pros, the adventure works well as an Eberron highlight reel one-shot, and I mean by that is like, you know, showing off what Eberron has to offer, or as just a mission in a larger Eberron campaign. You could make the Magpies more of a thing. You can make that the go-to airship that the players use. I think that there's a lot of fun opportunities there. Cons, no maps, always a bummer, especially here where the airship heist could definitely have used a map. Con, Chapter 2 is largely inconsequential. Like, yes, the players need to get that information, but there's no way for the players to fail, and there's really no steps for them to take. They just go wherever they want. There's some mini games they can play and have fun, which is nice, but there's no real... I don't know, there's just not enough substance there in Chapter 2, and then ultimately they get the information they need. And then Chapter 3, the other con, is the heist becomes a linear dungeon crawl. It's really disappointing from having this awesome setup to just basically going through room after room. Final verdict, the airship heist in Flight of the Magpies is brimming with cool ideas and interesting settings, but hampered by a linear structure and lack of maps. Thank you to everyone for watching this review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.